Jon Stewart had an episode about gender and about the complexity of gender, and Matt Walsh is responding to that video.
At the end of a week where I think our enemies thought that they landed a knockout blow, it was announced by Vanderbilt in a letter to state lawmakers that they would be pausing all gender transition procedures on minors. So they caved, they surrendered. For perhaps the first time in recent memory, anyway, a left-wing institution caved to pressure from the right. Very rarely does that happen.
What is he talking about? Here's the first thing, straight up. Everything from Daily Wire, they use language like right and left, slippery, useless language like this. They don't ever attempt to explain or like ascertain what those words mean to them. So the first time a right institution won something, what are you talking about?
The left has hailed this episode as the ultimate takedown of the conservative conspiracy theory that women don't have penises.
The left has, what is he talking about here? Who's the left says this? Who is that? What is the body or the person? What certifying place is the left that has said that this is the takedown, whatever? Oh, he said it. Oh, it's the left.
John breaks down the gender binary and gender spectrum in this week's episode.
We are in a new dawn of gender and sex complexity, where those who don't fit into a simple binary are meant to be seen with humanity. It wasn't always like this, people. As recently as, let's say, the 1990s, early 2000s, people were making reductive jokes about the subject.
It would be sad to see Jon Stewart apologizing for his past jokes, disavowing his previous belief that men can't have babies, and groveling for acceptance from a bunch of purple-haired 22-year-olds. But you must realize that Jon Stewart has always been a pathetic fraud. This is fully in keeping with his brand. It's still a sickening, stomach-churning display of self-debasement.
What is self-churning and debasing about growing and having a different view with new information and access to a greater, more diverse set of facts and truths? You know, one of the problems for people like this guy is every single day, all of our different branches of knowledge are converging on a deeper understanding of the human expression and the human experience. And every single day, his position is going to get dwindled. And these definitions are important to them because they need them for exclusion. They need them to define the terms of exclusion, the in-group and the out-group, and the people who get to participate. I think this is a good time to say what I think is going on here. Okay? The word gender is related, gender as I see it, relates to an overlay, an interface, a social category. It's a social construct. Man and woman, these are things that people grow into. These are things that people become. They come with traits. They come with expectations. They come with assumptions. Even if Matt Walsh is not defining it this way, he is intentionally failing to accept and understand that the people on the other side are talking about it this way. The people who are themselves experiencing life call it gender dysphoria. I don't know if that word fits in all cases, but that this is what they're talking about. Matt Walsh intentionally, with his documentary What is a Woman, and with all of his media, they go back and forth. They play with the fact that there is a biology. There's language we use that refers to biology. There are male and female categories, which to me are biological categories. They relate to the size, let's say, of the gametes in the body of the person. And even there's some complexity, but it seems that biology, male and female, it seems to be a more sturdy place to talk about them in a binary. But gender relates to the social relationship. Gender relates to a set of norms, expectations, and assumptions that we carry out and enforce and engage in with each other. And so the people who are trying to expand our definition and our understanding of gender are saying to you, I don't feel comfortable that I have to perform these sets of behaviors. If I'm a boy, I have to wear pants. If I'm a girl, I have to wear a dress. Men can be more aggressive in certain ways. Women are expected to be less so and be dainty. Women are expected to be interested in domestic tasks. Women are expected to be nurturing and want children, even in their older age. If a woman doesn't have children, this kind of a critique that men don't have. Women are expected to, that is the life purpose of a woman. That is what a woman should, what else have you done with your life if not to produce a child kind of thing. That is what's at question. These assumptions, it's important to recognize throughout this whole thing here, there is something related to biology that we might call male and female. That's a different conversation is what I want to say, because I'm actually not an expert in that field. I'm actually very much interested in and well versed in linguistics, however, and sociology. It's important to separate terms that have biological nature, such as male, female, from man and woman, okay? Which is why we say things like be a man, act like a woman, act like a lady, act like a man.
Nobody ever said, John, that every man is exactly the same as every other man, or that every woman is the same as every other woman. Squares can also come in many different shapes and colors, and rather many different sizes and colors, not shapes. That's the point. A square is still a square, so you can color a different color. There are lots of different ways you can describe squares depending on how you decorate them, but a square is still a square.
So right there, it's so funny. Depending on how you decorate them, a square is still a square. Which then tell me, why does Matt have issue with people who decorate themselves differently than he assumes that they should? Why is there so much content on the Daily Wire? And why is even some of these guys have talked about this in fashion in particular? Why does he have a concern with that at all?
A woman is a person who has no legal existence once married. That's early American coverture law. That's not right. No, throughout history, it's not a gotcha question. A woman is 30 shekels. I'm sorry, that's Leviticus.
What Jon Stewart did there so brilliantly was point out how the legal frameworks, the religious frameworks, whatever power structures existed at the time, were the ones who got to make definitions, used to contrive from thin air definitions to describe and then discriminate against a group that they called woman.
Yes, John, those are different things that different people and institutions have said about women over the course of history, but what is your point? Aristotle and the author of Leviticus and everyone else that you might name from ancient history all agreed on what a woman is fundamentally and physically. They all agreed that a woman can be defined because if they didn't, then they couldn't have said anything about women in the first place.
He's describing what I think he wants to call female. We can point to something called a human female, and we can attempt to describe it. And the historical power structures in human civilizations have attempted to do that, and they've set up our societies that way. And that is the social understanding that is at the heart of the question.
What you're proving is that over history, people have had different ideas about the legal standing of women, about their place in society, and so on and so on. But you haven't...
Wait, do you see how he says that? People have had different ideas about the legal standing of women. Why would women have a separate legal standing? Why did anyone have ideas about a separate legal standing for women? He doesn't address that. He just wants you to know that that's what it was. Made sense. That's what they were doing at the time. And you're just pointing that out. Well, yeah, we're pointing that out. That's the whole thing. That truth, that separation, that oppression is wholly predicated on this absurd separation that you have constructed. Matt, you and your friends. Maybe you didn't construct it, you inherited it, because you're not that clever. You're not that creative, actually. You inherited it, and you're just defending it. And so you're not impressive to me. I'm old enough that, like, I was born in 82. I'm old enough to remember, like, right now, women wear tights, walking around wearing tights and leggings, you know what I'm saying? That was not the case. I'm old enough to remember in the 90s when women started to wear that, there was a big public debate in the New York Times, in the newspapers, in the Daily News, I'm from New York, about women wearing leggings and being able to see their form and their shape, their legs and their butt, and the moral hazard that that's going to bring. How absurd. And we know that if we go another 50 years back, you know, corsets and the women's bathing suits, these were all enforced. These were all meaningful encroachments on women at the time. Does Matt realize that? The experience that people who fell into the women quarter category had, their capacity to be free and to live enriched lives. Note also that women couldn't have access to financial accounts in banks until the mid-70s. That women could be discriminated that way and they had to get their husbands. And so a woman who could not get married, who could not secure a man, was also financially insecure. She couldn't start a business. She couldn't rent out a place on her own. Damn, that's crazy. Can you imagine that? It wasn't so long ago. Those experiences were artificially, improperly, immorally overlaid. Those expectations and assumptions were overlaid on top of our experience with women in society. If you put yourself in the shoes of the woman to be that, could you imagine that? Matt, could you imagine living in a society where weird-looking white men couldn't access a bank account unless they were married? Wouldn't be good for you, bro. Gender as a social construct, as a framework of legal categorization and assumptions and expectations, those are made up. Those are constructed and fluid and often imbued with power, and that the expectations you have of the person when you see them, you are always just a bit late. You're always just a bit behind. And you're always, sometimes it's worse than behind. You're constructing it completely from your own experience and your own limitations, your own ignorance, your own assumptions, your own attachments. And that this person that you're observing has no commitment or attachment to that, and has no requirement to make you feel comfortable. That's the challenge you're having, Matt. And you're going to keep having it.
So what you're telling me is that people who make millions of dollars mutilating kids all say it's a good idea to mutilate kids. Wow, breaking news.
So the question is about the validity of non-binary gender, or the validity of expressions of gender labels and discourse outside of man and woman. And now he's reduced it to mutilating kids, you know? How gross, how grotesque. This is supposed to be a smart person. This is supposed to be one of the intellectual leaders of this supposed right wing.
You guys are the ones coming along out of nowhere demanding that we start engaging in those kinds of horrific practices.
No, that's not what's happening. And it's important for people who are his fans to understand this, of mainstreaming something that's always been in existence. That's what this challenging moment is. It's not even like, oh, new transgenders, that there's some difference going on. Again, this isn't biological. The challenge of human expression has always been there. It's always been met with resistance. There's always been some conservative who had a sense of how things should be. Major League Baseball. Ooh, think of our records. Think of the league if we let black people in. All the slaves. We can't let black people be citizens. Are you kidding me? They're not human. Women can't have bank accounts. Are you kidding me? They can't own businesses or be in the workplace. They're gonna make my dick hard. And they're not smart enough also. They're not smart enough. We're the smart guys, right? The ones with the dicks. We're smart. So that's what Matt and those guys do. They sit around a room and posture and smoke cigars. Because that's how you perform masculinity. And they want you to perform it correctly too. The medical community, with its challenge to understand the body, and the psychological community and other disciplines are merging at this understanding that it's all kind of one thing, you know, and it expresses differently. It's all one thing and it expresses differently and separately. And that the real challenge, Matt, for mentally unwell people like you is that you can't see the reality, which is that we're all one, and in fact, you know, all these divisions are in fact only distinctions and should be kept at that level so that we can appreciate them and not try to diminish each other. I have a video called Love, Separation, and Kendrick Lamar. I talk a little bit deeper about some of my ideas on these separations, these notions of ourselves as different, these labels, these categories, these social categories, and how they play out, and from where they come in our minds, how they play out in our minds as we carve out the world. And so we can hold very hard, strong beliefs based on personal separations, that sometimes these separations come from innocuous places. They're not like entirely malicious, but then an event occurs and you observe the event through that lens, and then you have a pernicious manifestation, right? Because you've separated in a way. I think Matt Walsh is an example of this. The people who identify as non-binary people, they're not just that. They are complex, deeply complex. Just like Matt Walsh is, frankly. A complex person. But with his dreary style of dress and demeanor and his voice, vocal tone, he lets you know that he is a man, you know? And he wants you to engage with him as a man. All the assumptions are comfortable for him. He wants to be a knight. He wants to be a hero. He wants to be chivalrous. He wants to be a man. It works for him, you know? But he doesn't have the empathy to realize that there are people just like him who have a different expression and a different mood, a different internal composition. Whether it's, I don't know, biological, chemical, social. It's like as they express and move through this world, they want to be engaged with in a way that is unique and specific to them, and the best you can do is to engage and develop that understanding of them through that experience, rather than to, oh man, woman, that's what's going on here. It's not about biology. Male people are not attempting to be female. Female people are not attempting to be male. But there are people trying to access a different mode of assumptions in the social space, because as I see it, gender is an overlay, an interface that has been overlaid over our experience with each other as beings in this consciousness. And it gives us it's a social categorization that comes with assumptions and requirements. And some of us are fine with them, some of us are unfine. It's very fluid. It's obviously fluid. It's been fluid through history. It's fluid between people and in people. It's fluid. It's all one thing.